Welcome to What Would Danbury Do, your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V.
Before we get started, we have some information to share. First, we're so very sorry that it's taken us so long to get back to these episodes. We missed you, and we are so grateful that you stayed with us. We will have a much more regular release schedule from this point forward. Thank you. Second, unfortunately, Rudy has had to step back for the minute due to work commitments. For the remainder of this season, we will be inviting special guest hosts, but no one can ever replace her, and we look forward to when she is able to join us again. So, let's jump in.
Listeners, we have all been waiting for this moment, this scene, this match. The Bridgertons finally take to their mallets for the most entertaining game of Pall Mall in literary history. But there's so much more than just friendly annihilation. There's Edmund, Violet, Daphne and Simon's baby, Mary, Edwina, Kate, and one very scared but incredibly impactful bee. It's episode 3, and things just got complicated. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook and Twitter as @BridgertonPod and Instagram as @WWDDPod. And we'd love for you to tweet us using the hashtag WWDDPod.
She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential Lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Hi, I'm Kate.
And I'm Adele.
This episode starts with a flashback. And I just want to make a note of the color that is happening in this episode, because when you think flashback, when you think the past, you think like vaguely sepia toned kind of.
Is that how they say it in Canada?
Oh, how would you say it?
Sepia.
Sepia sounds.
Or does Adele just say it wrong?
I don't know. Somebody write to us and tell us. So anyway, this sort of yellowish brownish wash. But this is Bridgerton, and this is the Bridgertons. So of course they use a big, like, bluey turquoisey wash over the past. And I thought that was a really interesting color choice.
And some de-aging not so magic on Anthony. He looks
yes.
like it's Uncanny Valley. Have I used that reference correct? Anyway, like, it looks wrong. And then he has like a triangle curled fringe.
Yeah, I think they're definitely trying to suggest that he's got sort of a childish hairdo, like, I'm at university and I go punting, and I don't even know what other really rich people in Britain do, but like that sort of hairstyle.
I feel like it's like the opposite of a faux hawk. Like it's like I don't know, a doe hawk. I don't know what it is, but it's wrong. Anyway.
All right, so we're in the woods. Edmund and Anthony are out stalking, which, by the way, is now what I know it's called since I read Prince Harry's memoir.
They're out only we could do an episode on that one.
And Edmund is trying to teach Anthony how to take down a stag. And Anthony, who apparently has always been Anthony, is too quick and too impatient and just really frustrated that things aren't going his way. But then we've got Edmund, who is just being a really good dad. He's just like, patience, breathe. You can do this. You'll get there. Really solid dad advice in the 2 minutes.
I mean, there's the one shot to the heart can down the largest of beasts. That doesn't feel like foretelling at all. And then there's, just before he dies, I think there's like, love is loving the best and the worst of you. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much this whole season.
I like that you said foreshadowing, because you're absolutely right. First, there's the like one shot to the heart thing. Then there's the point where he says, you're getting in your own way. Like, you've decided this, and therefore nothing will happen until you change your mind.
Could that be the new family motto?
Get out of your own fucking way.
Because it applies to all of them. I mean, and like an in-house therapist would be the best thing for Bridgerton instead of a in-house father in the shape of a bee. I don't know.
Yeah, look, Freud is still 100 years off at this particular point in time, but we have Edmund doing his fatherly thing
and dying whilst looking like a zombie.
Well, I mean, first he goes to pick the flowers for Violet,
lilies.
Right?
They're his favorite. They were just
They
purple.
were like, yeah, they were purple. Although later I think Violet says something about lilacs. And like,
I got the flower wrong. Look how I'm failing as a human being.
Well, I've never seen lilacs grow out of the ground like that. I'm reasonably sure lilacs grow on a tree. That
garden looked as fake as Anthony's young face.
The bee, however, not fake.
It looked especially fake when he was like shooing at his face. And then what looked even faker was how he went grey.
Look, I don't know. I've never actually seen somebody in anaphylactic shock before. I don't actually know, because there was definitely some swelling and definitely some
would be
gray.
Accurate, yeah. I'm using my dog's paw incident. Being stung by a bee as a reference point, so who knows?
But presumably he would go grey because he wasn't getting enough oxygen, right?
Wouldn't he go blue? That is the colour theme.
They've already put a blue wash over it. They can't make him go blue as well. He's not a Smurf. So I think the gray might just be the lack of oxygen. And then, of course, Anthony starts freaking out. He calls for his mum. His mum really freaks out. And then she does the first hideous thing that she does to Anthony in this episode, which is send him away from his dying father and put him in charge of all of the other children, make him responsible for shielding them from his dead father, glossing over the fact that he himself has seen his dad die.
Yes, that was terrible, and boo, Violet, but also context. It's rough. Yeah. The thing I want to pick apart, Ruth Gamble, how dare you make me feel that in my chest and in my tear ducts? You terrible human being.
Really? How much did you feel it in your chest and your tear ducts?
Well, you know I'm a stone.
I do.
And I haven't watched this episode in quite some time, and I actually felt it. And I don't know if it's because I probably skipped these parts in the last rewatch. Histrionic isn't something I would necessarily associate Violet with ever. To see her go to that extreme, I guess that's the choice, is like, this is how big a deal this is. Like, she's usually someone who has her shit together, so...
Yeah, I think it's really interesting throughout the course of this episode, seeing past Violet and comparing her to present Violet. I genuinely think from this moment on, Anthony stops growing, right? He sort of becomes who he is in this particular moment, hits like an emotional developmental wall, doesn't really take any emotional steps forward into maturity until he has to, when he starts meeting Kate. It's a juxtaposition to the way that we see Violet, who in the flashbacks in this episode we're going to see made some really questionable choices that, as you say, contextually make a lot of sense, but also have a direct effect on particularly Anthony, but all of her children. But then we know that she doesn't stop. This isn't the defining moment in her life like it is the defining moment in Anthony's, and she eventually grows and continues to mature and become the Violet that we know in the future.
Stay with me. It's like in that moment she thrusts him away with being present with someone he loves into responsibility, and it's like he never allows himself just to be with someone he loves anymore because he's been thrust at the role.
That's a really
and then
good
the
thought,
next
actually.
Scene also supports that, I guess.
Yeah, I like that a lot. He doesn't ever choose to stay present. He doesn't even know how, really. She thrusts him out of that moment, and then he never really learns how to be present.
And he's always forward. On the outskirts of his family. Like, he's never... They all revolve around him, but he's not with them.
Yeah. So we move from the past into the present, and we have a coach ride. The Sharmas are headed early to the Bridgerton estate. They are accompanied by Lady Danbury, who is making some pointed remarks about open-mindedness. Although to be fair,
why is she going? I mean, she really doesn't need to go.
But she's their sponsor for the season, right?
I mean, it's just to involve her unnecessarily.
I don't think it's unnecessary. I think she's sponsoring them for the season. I don't think 100% she has to go, but I think that she's Lady Danbury, and of course she's going to go. I think what we have to make clear is they're discussing the expectation of an engagement or a proposal that will result in an engagement, and then the Sharmas, job done. Kate, job done.
Mary, I can have a life and a storyline now.
One of the things I want to point out, because it's going to drive me absolutely crazy in later episodes. In this carriage ride, we see Edwina talking about what she can do to please Lord Bridgerton, which dress she should wear, what she can do to make him like her. And Kate points out quite rightly that she should also be thinking about whether she likes him. But Edwina is not ready to hear this, and she's more focused on whether or not Anthony is going to like the pink silk dress.
Considering Kate spent 6 years training her daughter to play oh my God, Freudian slip, her sister to appeal to men, it's not unfair that Edwina's worried about someone liking her versus what her happiness is. She's been on this path a long time.
I think that'll come out a little bit later in the episode as well. They arrive at
Aubrey Hall,
and Kate has a Pemberley moment looking upon the extensive grounds of Aubrey Hall. You can see her maybe begin to question whether Anthony is so bad after all.
And while she's doing that, Anthony is looking upon her grand facade and smiling to himself. And their little interplay, which was very cute, with Newton as well. Newton, who is in short supply this whole season. Daphne mistakenly believes that this is the Edwina Sharma whom Anthony wants to marry because she can feel the heat.
Well, also, I mean, Anthony comes out, like all of the Bridgerton clan come out, including baby Augie, all there, on the front steps to greet the Sharmas. And Anthony goes to Kate first. And you could argue it's because she's standing there alone.
Yes.
Or you could argue that he's really just going to see Kate and that's the end of it.
He wants her so bad. Anthony cooing at that baby, it's in the background, is so Jonathan. It's so the actor. I don't know if it's the actor, is it an Anthony choice, but I'd like to think Anthony would be a great dad. In the books, apparently he is. Well, actually, he is a really good dad to some of his siblings.
Yeah.
And it's so sweet.
It is. Actually,
I'm so soft.
Actually, I think the way that all of the Bridgertons react with the baby is really telling.
Yeah.
We see a lot of them cooing and greeting him and just being really excited about the next generation. And then Eloise is invited over and she's like, has he changed since the last time I saw him? So very clearly not engaged with baby.
And yet all the men are, like, Colin grabs the baby, Anthony's cooing. I can't remember what Benedict was doing, but when do I ever? Obviously, we know family is important to the Bridgertons. So, so this is like the first of many observations Daphne makes during her episode.
Through the whole episode, I feel like Daphne is tuned in to Anthony and what's happening much more deeply than anybody else, including Anthony and Kate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she knows chemistry, she feels chemistry, she understands chemistry, she knows what's happening here.
Yeah, immediately. And she knows her brother really well.
Yeah. All right.
We do have to quickly mention the Featherington household.
We absolutely do, particularly because they're called luckless souls in the Lady Whistledown voiceover.
Pen is fucking mean.
She's so mean.
She's mean a lot in this episode, honestly. Clearly she's having some Eloise withdrawal.
Yeah, look, it's one of the things that I feel was so important in the books. Lady Whistledown could be cutting. She wasn't mean. She would take down people who deserved it, but she was always much more clever than she was mean. And there's a lot of the voiceover that, like, even the voiceover for the Sharmas was about how far ladies will travel for an engagement. And I mean, referring to her own family as luckless souls might be a little bit less mean because, of course, she includes herself in that. But I agree. The voiceover from Lady Whistledown is very, very mean this season.
You can say stuff about your family, right? And you can say it to each other. But to say it publicly is next level. And she does love them. Like, she doesn't hate them. She hates her circumstances. But moving on, Portia realizes the perfect solution to Lord Featherington trying to find a wife is that she's got the perfect, biddable, controllable one in her own household, which is daughter number 1, or is she daughter number 2?
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, the tall one.
The one who didn't marry for cheese.
I would marry for cheese. I think Prudence made the call.
Philippa married for cheese.
Sorry, yeah. I always get them mixed up.
I always thought this was a little bit of a self-own, really, though, because Portia is like, we need somebody dumb who's completely incapable of managing a household, who is, in fact, utterly useless on every level. And then her own daughter walks in, and it's Portia's job to make sure that Prudence is well brought up and able to manage a household. So to suddenly be like, you're useless, is kind of your own fault, Portia.
Could this be contemporary societal commentary about how baby boomers blame millennials and Gen X for being spoiled and not knowing how to do things? It's like, we're in the reflection of your parentings, dude.
Varley also drops a term that I'm going to be using for the rest of my life, which is chickabiddy, sort of a derogatory name for
It
girls.
Sounds derogatory. It sounds like it could be racist too. Like, there's something about it.
I will Google before I use it, but I love it, chickabiddy. I think it's so cute.
Can I say, not terrifically interested in any of the Featherington storylines this episode?
Not
really?
At all.
I'm not even that interested in Pen.
I mean,
do I say this every time? Yes.
Yes. So Portia says you will charm him with some assistance, in the idea that finally she's going to start helping Prudence get a match. And what I loved best is there's this split-second scene with Penny where she literally facepalms, and then we move on. And it's funny how you say that the Lady Whistledown commentary is mean through the season, because I think it absolutely is. But Penelope's so disengaged from her family. And I mean, she's always felt like an outsider. She's always sort of recognized that she's smarter, she's more interested in the world, she has more to offer than her sisters have ever sort of thought about. But she's never been disengaged to this extent. And I imagine that those two things are really quite entwined with each other, right? Like her disengagement from her family, her feud with Eloise, and the meanness of Lady Whistledown, I think are all part of the same braid.
I'm getting so tired, and it's not your commentary. I'm just bored.
They clearly know what we're all waiting for.
Yes.
Because they keep going back to Aubrey Hall, and we're like, yes, Pall Mall. And then they're like, no, we're going to give you another scene. And then they're like, yes, Pall Mall. And then they're like, no, we're going to give you another scene. So we get a scene with Eloise who's reading, and she's slipping revolutionary literature into her book. And I didn't notice the first time I watched, but Colin absolutely clocks that that's what she's doing. So Colin is more observant than we may have given him credit for ever.
Well, it's much more in line with the Colin from the books. They've definitely deviated a lot with Colin, but there has been some attempts in this season to get closer to the Cupid Colin and the knowing Colin and the connected Colin, because he really is the glue of the family in the books. Like, he's the through line. So Anthony asked Violet for the ring, and it's one of many conversations like, you sure? You don't look like you really have your heart in this, dude.
Just before we get there, I do like that Eloise and Kate have an immediate bond as they go up the stairs. And they're both wearing blue. So it's
and
a nice
blue stockings.
Connection. Yeah, exactly. I thought that was really kind of a nice little moment.
They both love the country. They're really competitive. They're both very independent. But Kate is a person in the real world. Yeah. And Eloise needs to learn how to be in the real world.
We get a shot of Violet's engagement ring. I tried to zoom in, but I couldn't really get too close to it without it going out of focus. And I get that fashions change, but I think it's a really ugly ring.
I don't hate it.
You don't hate it?
No.
Is it pearls? What is it?
I think it's it looks like a little, like a daisy in pearls or something, but I didn't try to look at it, so my memory might be bad, but I actually used to have a ring like that.
Did you? Oh, now I feel like I've insulted some family.
But you know me, I'm not a real, fussy jewelry type, so I just would always want to choose a ring myself. It's really nice to have an heirloom, whatever, but no, I want my ring. Also, I'd start thinking about who's died wearing this ring.
I mean, it's
Is this ring haunted?
It's Violet's engagement ring, right?
So did he rip it off his mum's, I was going to say cold dead hand, but it's like warm alive hand.
No, probably not. Look, I don't know very much about the fashion of wearing jewelry. It may be that, you know, you get an engagement ring and then you get a wedding band and you take your engagement ring off.
Maybe, but Violet is someone who still wakes up and thinks her husband's next to her. Can you see her giving over a ring like that, where it's like one of the last things other than the 7 children that she has of his?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because especially if it's an heirloom, then she would know that it would go to her son when he proposes.
They can wait, goddammit. Cold dead hand.
It's Violet. Violet has been trying to get her children married off since they were born.
But like Anthony says, why are you so cautious about this then? You've been trying to marry me off all the time.
He's examining that ring so closely. I couldn't figure out what exactly he was looking for. Like,
did she give me the real one?
Yeah. He was definitely really looking good.
Has she swapped out the jewelry for paste?
Are the Bridgertons actually in trouble? Lady Whistledown would know if that was true.
Absolutely. It also segues into what happens immediately after Edmund has died. And what happens is, apparently, every staff member known to Mayor comes at an 18-year-old kid who's just dealing and starts asking very functional and operational questions that I understand why they need to know, but I would like to think they give him a second.
I wrote down the same thing. I said that there's lots of footmen with lots of questions, and the admin of death is a lot.
But also, there's very like a huge hierarchy in terms of staff and the family. Like, would any of them be talking to him that way?
Well, I did wonder if there should be like a
butler,
personal,
maybe,
or like a personal secretary or something.
Yeah, but not all of them.
But I suppose that, okay, so the way that it worked in my head. So first of all, I was like, Jesus Christ, give the man some space. He's clearly like overwrought. But also, I think part of the whole mythology of the Bridgertons is how close they are and how much they love each other as a family and how unusual that is. So I expect that when a man dies, generally speaking, you know, the son is quite excited to move up to the title or is well prepared for that kind of duty. So they don't worry too much about the emotional niceties because Anthony is expected to, already be man enough to like assume the mantle of the Viscount title and all of the responsibility that comes with it, but also like not to be that attached to his dad. Like it's not supposed to devastate him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This deeply.
Because I'm like, what should we do with the body? Put it in the cold room somewhere or keep it cold. Also, you know what really pissed me off, and I only realized it on this watch? The lady's maid asks, she's still hysterical. Still. I'm assuming this is maybe in the first half an hour, if that.
Yeah.
I think she's allowed to, like, she's also heavily pregnant. So if you're assuming they don't have a relation, like a personal relationship between son and father, because I said it the wrong way around, father and son, wouldn't you think that women are pathetic and really soppy, so let her go?
Well, I mean, the maid does point out that it's probably not good for the baby, which is fair enough.
That's really enlightened, lady.
Well, but also, I mean,
she's on the stairs. Like, it is dangerous. I mean, I'm not even safe on the stairs when I'm sober.
How did she get from the garden through the house to like collapse on the stairs? Like, why didn't they bring her to like a nice fainting couch or something?
Because it is a very physical performance.
Yeah, it is
She's
a very physical
all over the place. It's like the turmoil of her heart is externalized.
I have to say that Jonathan Bailey is giving such good face in this scene. And I'm so mad. I'm still so mad that he didn't get the Emmy nomination and Regé-Jean Page did, because Jonathan Bailey leaves Regé-Jean Page in the dust.
Complaints can be directed to. Look, I actually agree with you. But you know, like it's like who gets nominations is never about the performance. Let's be honest. I think Regé-Jean he's an okay actor, but Jonathan Bailey, he breathes in character.
Yeah. He does a really good job.
He doesn't just stand and look handsome.
He can do both. He can stand and look handsome and give really good face.
Yeah. So let's get to the fun bit. Pall Mall.
It's still not the fun bit. I mean, yes, okay. Like it's the next step towards the fun bit where Daphne's going around and like laying out the wickets, providing this sort of concise breakdown of like what kind of player all of the Bridgertons are and how Kate and Edwina should conduct themselves during the game. There's a lot of moments in this episode that really clearly broadcast how much of a Bridgerton Kate is and how much of a Bridgerton Edwina is not. Mm-hmm. And I think the first moment was on the stairs with Eloise, when she and Eloise sort of have that moment and Kate's in blue and, you know, she's already slotting in with Eloise, where Edwina failed to make a connection with Daphne. I think this is the second moment when Kate is excited about this. You know, her competitive juices are up. She's having a really good time already, and they haven't even started yet. She has that sort of anticipatory gleam in her eye, and Edwina just looks terrified.
They make another comparison a bit later in the Pall Mall stuff, which is Edwina doesn't want to play anymore because she doesn't want to get her shoes dirty. Yeah. And Kate and Anthony don't give a shit about their shoes. I'm like, that's very, very obvious.
It could be twisted to say that Edwina cares more for her servants. So that...
I was going to say this. You beat me to it. Yeah. Like, Anthony doesn't give a shit if his valet has to, like, work on those, like, leather boots for, like, hours. He only gets to sleep between 3 and 4 a.m. and deal with a belligerent asshole all day. No wonder he got yelled at 18. He's been an asshole his whole life.
It's all in pursuit of Pall Mall. All right, okay, and then we don't actually get to the Pall Mall game. We go back to London. We're in Genevieve's modiste shop. Lady Featherington is all, get her tits out! And Genevieve is like, stop fucking with my design, lady! And, yeah. Importantly, we have Penelope's attempt to explain away why Genevieve saw her at the market buying letters. And Genevieve is really just doesn't want to be a part of this conversation. She's
Teflon. It doesn't exist yet, but she's Teflon.
Yeah.
Or maybe Teflon exists in this alternate reality.
But Penelope, whose tits are out, is really having a bit of a heaving bosoms moment. She's clearly very stressed about everything that's going on.
So yeah, Jonathan Bailey acts with his breaths. Everyone knows where I'm about to go.
Look, if you've got a rack like that, like
Nicola Coughlan, act with your breasts. They are magnificent.
We finally get to Pall Mall. The thing that I wrote here on my notes is this whole thing was narrative edging.
I was just thinking foreplay, but edging is much more accurate and specific.
But we finally get there. The screenwriters finally take us there.
But we also know that Benedict's apparently stressing out about getting into the Royal Academy of the Arts.
Oh, yeah. Do we care? No, we don't care.
Not really. It's also like, you've had your adventure, you've developed as a human being to Colin. I'm like, you could have gone overseas, surely. You're the second son.
I thought that was actually really interesting because it's a direct contrast to what happened in the books, right? Because Colin's book is all about how he feels unworthy and bereft without an occupation. And he specifically names Anthony as having the Viscount position and all of that responsibility. And Benedict has his art and all of the landscapes, and Colin has nothing, and then, you know, develops himself that way. So this is the exact opposite, because now Benedict is saying, well, you had your travels and I've had nothing. And, you know, I want to pursue art to try and have some sort of occupation, leave a mark on the world. So it's an exact opposite. So we actually skipped forward a little bit because we have Edwina being a tiny bit insufferable here and talking about having fun, like come to the competitive side, Edwina. We have cookies and also the mallet of death, which Kate chooses.
Which and love, they kept that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. And everyone absolutely piles on to Anthony, who is doing a terrible job of pretending he doesn't care.
There's something about a hero on the screen doing a terrible job of not looking petty that I find highly attractive. Just me?
Look, we all have our things.
Oh, I love it.
Well, also, I think it's bonding too, right? All of the
like he does this
Anthony.
slow clap with a smirk at one point. I'm like, I've never found you hotter. Apparently, I really do like bad boys that are awful, but he's not that awful. But yeah, I'm like, ought to be.
Also, I mean, historically, I think that pink was a manly color.
Should we just subscribe to this bullshit around gendered colors? No. Do I like the fact that she stole the black one out from under his nose and his siblings loved it? Yes. As you mentioned, like Daphne talks through all their games and it's foretelling what's actually happens. Because I forgot about Colin until he whacks the ball right into the bushes after Kate has smacked Anthony's into the bushes and then Colin follows it. And clearly from what he says afterwards, which is like, you two go and get it, it's Cupid Colin from the books.
Yeah, it's not only Daphne who has an inkling of what's going on. And look, to be honest, I wasn't entirely sure if we're supposed to think that Colin understands sexual tension or if Colin's just a chaos monkey, because it could go either way, really.
I mean, my rate is second. I still think of him as a 14-year-old.
Yeah. There's also this part where Anthony goes, I hit my ball out of the way on purpose, so you, Edwina, would have a clear path with your color. Do you think that she believed him?
In some ways, it's a bit harder to get a read on Edwina, like what's making her feel uncomfortable. Is it that she senses maybe they're not on the same page? Maybe it's the competitiveness. Maybe it's feeling, oh, my sister's fitting in with this better than I, and they might be comparing us. Like, who knows? And I don't think it's the fault of the actress. I just think it was a bit underwritten in this scene. They just make her look juvenile and just a bit insipid. Preferencing like clothing and feeling uncomfortable over actually making an effort, which I don't know if that's fair. Because that's a lot of energy coming at you from a lot of very competitive, extroverted people. And I don't know if I agree that I think she might be an introvert. So yeah, it's a lot.
I think this might be the first overt opportunity where we, as viewers, begin to understand how much pressure Edwina is putting on herself.
Yes.
The vast majority of the story up until this point has been how much responsibility Kate has shouldered, how much work she's done, how she's set aside any hopes or dreams or ambitions she might have had for herself in order to support Edwina and bring Edwina back up to London and give Edwina every chance that she could possibly have. But one of the things that I think is done quite subtly, particularly in these earlier episodes, is how much internalizing Edwina has done of that and how much pressure she puts on herself. And I think a lot of the things that are a bit insipid, as you say, and are, genuinely quite irritating are also her efforts to be perfect and her efforts to deserve all of the attention and all of the benefits that she's going to reap on behalf of her sister. And I think in this scene, we start to see that a little bit, where she doesn't feel like she can get involved because she can't be anything except the perfectly brought up, well-mannered, always charming, always calm future Viscountess, and not Kate, who literally has no skin in the game and can therefore throw herself in.
But Kate is being 100% herself. Edwina doesn't feel like that would be accepted.
Exactly.
And that's really upsetting. I think you're right about how subtle or underwritten, whatever you want to say, a lot of the audience could not see the inverse of Kate's pressure being Edwina's pressure. This is a shared pressure. This wasn't just one person working their ass off. It was two. And one of them was conditioned a lot more as a young person. You can have good intentions and have bad outcomes. And Edwina feels her whole worth is not... Actually, this gets disproved a little bit later, but like it's this one outcome she's aiming for. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or they're all aiming for.
Well, and I don't think that Edwina is insensate to the fact that the fate of her family rests on her marrying well.
I mean, that's the basis of so many historical romance books and probably many others on top of that. But yeah, this is not new to the genre.
She has to marry well enough that she can financially support her family.
She's just a character you don't get the direct perspective of as often, so you feel less empathetic towards her, which is a bit rough.
It is, although I do still maintain that she's very irritating very often.
I don't find her irritating. There's so many parts of this episode where I'm like, did there need to be this much stuff in here that's not interesting? Because this episode's an hour and 8 minutes. It's a lot.
We get a little minor scene with Violet and Mary talking about their children and relating to each other.
The only time Mary gets to talk about something other than marriage. Only time she gets to talk about herself.
Yeah, and I mean, she and Violet have a nice moment talking about, having lost their husbands and how important their children are to their lives. So,
which then sets up what happens with Kate and Anthony in the bushes. That very cute fall in the mud, them actually having a moment of connection over laughing, which these two people do not seem like people that laugh very often. And then they have a genuine moment talking about wanting the best for their siblings. I think this actually happens before the fall. I'm just like you, Anthony. I just have a vagina.
Yeah. I feel the responsibility as keenly as you do. I have that protective instinct as well.
Yeah, that moment of connection, which is talking to each other like equals, which was really like the actors nailed that. It's the first time they've sort of just spoken, not vulnerably, but like just as a person, not like trying to get a reaction out of each other. And then you have the moment of them falling where they connect on a laughter and a bit of joy, which is not common for them. And then getting a little saucy with each other again. And she accidentally, meaningfully hits the ball and hits Edmund's marker. Like they had these two moments of connection. They have a third one that he's not aware of. This is when I think the actress was so great. You could see this vulnerability and realization wash over her. And she looks like a tiny child like Anthony does by CGI at the start of the episode. But like they both lost fathers. They both took on a lot of responsibility. They both haven't probably dealt with their loss at all. And we know that Kate's loss is a huge part of the book and it's not dealt with at all in this season. So it could be a bit of a glimpse into next season, maybe, hopefully. But it's really smartly done. These three moments of connection, bang, 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 but all very different on the emotional scale.
But I do want to make a point about them falling in the mud and then laughing, which I also agree is a really nice scene. It releases some tension for the viewers because, they're fighting all the time. They're sparring all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Well, and I think what that laughing scene does is it sort of says they understand when they've gone too far. Like they know how to take the sparring to a line and then they know when they've crossed that line and they're able to draw it back and to find genuine connection, which I think is really important when working with this enemies to lovers plot line. I think you have to be very aware that it can be a very fine line between mutual antagonism and
harassment
slipping
and
over
and
slipping over into the darker side of it. And I think that's what the laughing does really, really well.
I don't know if this is an actor or directorial decision or even in the writing. Kate starts laughing when he's trying to help her out. Like she thinks this situation is kind of ridiculous. She's beginning to see how funny it is. He's like very still. And I think that decision showing us a lot about the characters in that she's had a bit more joy in her life. She's finding the frivolity in it. It took him a while to feel okay to even to laugh. He took longer, and I think that's really symbolic of them as people and their experiences in this world. But yeah, really well done. And like they cover a lot of ground in that really fast if you think about it.
They do. And I think also it's important to note for anybody who is following the Pall Mall game that Daphne wins again.
And we never know why she's good. She's kept it a secret enigma from the viewers as well.
Yeah, she's an absolute enigma. But Anthony starts walking away into another turquoise flashback. And this is the birth scene. So Violet is in labor with Hyacinth. Something is obviously not going right. Violet's in a lot of pain physically for the labor and going into labor before the baby is quite ready, but also obviously all of the emotional pain of having to go through this without Edmund and just the stress of everything as well. Anthony is presented with an absolutely impossible choice.
I'm still not sure what she wanted him to do.
I don't think she is either.
I would tell you what I wrote down. So women have no say on the body. Is she saying that Edmund would defer to her choice so he would know what to do, that like to listen to her? Is that the interpretation? Or is she mixing together who is in charge versus what he would do? And then it's becoming this jumbled mess. The only thing I could think was, as a man, he defers to her in the role as the Viscount.
Yeah, look, it's really tricky because she does say, Edmund loved me so much, he should be here. He would know what to do, which I originally took as Edmund would choose me because he loves me so much.
But we also know that the rate of infection with cutting into women at that point was basically killing them anyway. So,
well, they didn't know how to stitch them back up again. So,
and they didn't know that they should be washing their hands.
Yes, exactly. So if they cut into her and took the baby out, like that is killing the mother. It's just the way that it is.
Also, like that doctor, terrible. I would not let him go back into the room.
Yeah.
I mean, that was reflective at the time, though. I've seen lots of people get really upset about this. Like, this was reflective of the time.
It is, but it is quite a traumatic scene. To watch.
But we never get an answer on what they do.
Well, I mean, clearly something must happen. They must move the baby, or
I want to bet there's a midwife in there doing the right thing quietly.
Yeah.
Just pretending they're listening to the doctor's advice, because he was terrible.
But I mean, Anthony displays some proto-feminism by saying, do whatever Violet wants. I don't know necessarily that it's empowering of Violet so much as he just can't deal, so he walks away and just leaves it for her.
There is a lot of histrionic Violet, all through this episode. I wish there were a few more layers in there. She's either up here and my hand is above my head, or she is flat as attack. So yeah, it's a choice.
It is. I mean, it's more that, obviously grief affects everybody differently and there are different stages at all times. And we do see, Violet is hysterical in the very high emotionally impact scenes. But I do find that the writing in the scene was quite conflicted in that, I genuinely didn't know what Violet wanted from Anthony or what Edmund would have done, even though Violet seems to be very sure that she would know what Edmund would have done.
In some respects, some of the scenes are really well written and some of them are really not. It feels like it's been written by committee or people have split up the scenes. Maybe
it's genuinely supposed to be confusing, but
as it would be.
It did leave me unaware of what I was supposed to feel in that scene, and as such, I don't think that it worked particularly well. Anyway, I'm really sorry.
My next line in my notes is, don't care about the Featheringtons. I don't even know what this scene is. That's all I wrote.
Well, Lady Featherington is trying to teach Prudence to flirt. And
there you go.
She must be so frustrated that all of her intelligence and her scheming genes all ended up with the daughter that she doesn't really like and not with the ones that she does.
We have a one-on-one with observation, Edwina and Anthony sort of talk about how he doesn't read anything but ledgers and she has strong feelings and that she will support his traveling around while she looks after the children. But please don't confuse that with being a pushover.
Yeah. He's like, you're so agreeable. It's so refreshing. And I hear, you will never cause me any trouble whatsoever and I will do whatever I like.
And we're supposed to find all this delightful, by the way, with a little choir of old ladies smiling. Old ladies who aren't old ladies. It was a nice scene. Did it need to be that long? Probably not. Yeah.
I wanted to feel more connected to Edwina as also somebody who reads a lot and finds a lot of pleasure in reading. But I don't know. I recognize, but she's just so sanctimonious and I find that really troubling.
The value in this scene is what happens afterwards, which are the sibling chats.
Yeah.
So we have Lady Danbury listening at the door while Kate and Edwina talk, and we hear about how there was no lulls in the conversation. You know what? I can have conversations where there are no lulls because I don't like anyone else talk. Not necessarily a good thing.
She's retconning there were 100% lulls. Also, we just have to go back for a second to note that Edwina wants to tell Anthony about Galib, who was 16 at the time and had not written anything. So
that's a literary fail.
It's a historical accuracy fail on the part of the writers. Maybe check your dates before you just throw out random Indian writers. Edwina's retconning. There were definitely awkward lulls. It's totally fine. Whatever. She's happy. And then we have that delightful scene where Lady D is listening at a door. Lady Bridgerton is listening at a door. Eloise walks in and is like, what is going on here?
They don't have TV, Eloise. Stop judging. The Daphne and Anthony scene's great. That's where the Bridgertons have the advantage. They've had more screen times to develop individually, an extra season. Daphne talks about what it's like to fall in love with someone, to hold your breath, to like not be able to look at them, feel like, you know, all that stuff. And he definitely starts staring off in the distance, and they just thankfully resisted the need to have a recollection of like a misty gate up in the top right corner.
But this is why Anthony is so good, because you know there's a Misty Kate in the corner there. The screenwriters don't have to put it there. He's doing it all.
Is this a second Are You Sure conversation? Third one. It's a lot now.
Are You Sure count of the conversation through the episodes. For reasons of, I don't know, I'm just going to continue to call it narrative edging through the rest of this series. We're back in town, dinner at the Featheringtons with the Cowpers, where Cressida's absolutely throwing herself at Lord Featherington, talking about her warm and affectionate and maternal nature. And okay, look, I know obviously Penny has reasons to later throw the new Modiste under the bus, but I quite like her dress. I think her dress is quite
innovative. Dresses are not scandalous. Cute. They're not horrible. I'm not saying Cressida is a nice human being, but she's doing the best she can. And I'm beginning to feel sorry for her because she does not deserve this. No one deserves anything like that comes at them. Like, you know.
She didn't get the prince. She's not getting Lord Featherington. Her hair is pulled back so tightly that I'm reasonably sure she must go around with a migraine 30% of the time.
I think we all sort of project our own mean girl on Cressida, but I don't know if it's warranted this season.
I mean, she didn't have a brilliant first season like she was supposed to, right? So I feel like she's been taken down a few notches. I mean, we're not going to ever like Cressida.
But we have to credit the fact that Daphne completely blew up what was going to be her marriage to a prince. Yeah. And Daphne didn't even want him. If you told this story from Cressida's point of view, that could look like her villain origin story. Like, come on.
And I mean, her story is not really that different from Edwina's in the sense that she's an only child. She is the only opportunity that family has to continue in importance and wealth. So it's,
Yeah. All right.
I did like it, this one scene where somebody says that there's nothing quite like British cooking. And then I thought, oh, friends.
Ooh. Yeah, we do like bland, light, gelatinous.
Boiled to shit vegetables.
Seasoning, what that?
So then we move from British cooking to Colin spiking Benedict's tea. I did some Googling on this because it's a weird purple powder, right? And it's supposed to open his mind. And the vast majority of the people on the internet think that it's likely opium. I am not familiar with opiates, barring like the codeine that I occasionally take for migraines, which does not open my mind, but the internet tells me that opiates can sort of give that feeling. They could also be mushrooms or some other kind of psychedelics like that, but it's likely opium. They're likely purple because they would have been dyed with lavender, and it would be very common for men of this era to be able to get their hands on it and get high as necessary.
Just like the mental picture of Benedict being in a Taylor Swift music video in his head.
I mean, for a first go with mind-altering substances, he goes all in. If I was Colin, I'd be pissed. Like, how much of that little package set Colin back?
And that cost him a ton.
Yeah.
And he's just like, ha ha. I'd be like, that was your tripping balls dosage for probably. Also, the idea that like this Colin would do that doesn't seem real to me. Book Colin, maybe.
Do you know, I think I actually disagree. I think the book Colin wouldn't seek out mind-altering substances. I think like he's bored with his life and he feels a little bit like he doesn't have any responsibilities or sort of any pursuits. But I don't feel like he would hide behind or try and drug himself out of that. Whereas television Colin has no idea who he is and is basically bouncing from one heartache to another. He feels like a college student, and college student Colin 100% would lean into the opiates with this idea that it would make him more worldly and more grown up. So I disagree. I think television Colin would take opiates.
He takes the opiates to distract himself from the fact he hasn't heard if he's gotten into the Royal Academy of the Arts or whatever. And then it goes straight to a scene of Kate preparing tea and having a conversation with Eloise.
And like brewing proper tea with all of these spices and making proper chai. I saw this scene and I thought, oh, well, that's just supposed to be a clever visual play. But then I did wonder if perhaps it was suggesting that chai and opiates are similar, and maybe that wasn't.
Like this subtle storyline that Kate's microdosing the whole time.
Yeah. And I did wonder if perhaps that even though the visual play was a bit cute, maybe perhaps it wasn't the best choice to have gone on with. But I really liked what you said earlier about Kate living in the real world and Eloise thinking she wants to live in the real world, but not really having any way of doing so. And I think like this next scene really underlines what you said about that, because, you know, there's Kate making tea and Eloise comes out and asks her, you know, you seem great. You seem to be having a great time. Being unmarried is amazing. Tell me all about it. And Kate sort of reining her in a little bit and being like, it's not fabulous. It's not really the best way to live at the moment.
It's like a perception versus reality thing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember which one of them makes the point that it's not the women's fault, it's society's fault, which they're very right about. But yeah, I do think it was another opportunity for Eloise to maybe listen to people around her that she doesn't necessarily take to her own detriment.
So we go from here into a really heavy flashback scene of Violet at some point in the year following Edmund's death, quite low. And my feeling is like, obviously, is grief. Do you think there might have been some postpartum in there as well, potentially?
I mean, regardless of what happened in the end, certainly that would have been an incredibly traumatic birth experience. And she may have come through it physically unscathed, but it's unlikely. It's very clear she didn't come through it emotionally unscathed. Yeah. I wrote down in my notes, maybe Anthony and Violet should have taken some opium.
I mean, so we're both oldest in our families. I understand where Violet's at, but you cannot say that shit to an eldest when it's not fixable. There is nothing they can do, and they will punish the shit out of themselves to try and find a way, or blame themselves for not being able to fix it.
Her grief is just so all-consuming, and she is so selfish in it. And again, as you say, context. But yeah, as you say, like, you don't say the quiet parts out loud, you know.
And she's not engaging with Hyacinth clearly either.
Well, I mean, she goes to see the children. She she gets dressed, she bathes or whatever.
It's Taylor Swift. This is me trying, is what I was thinking while I was watching. Yeah.
But I mean, you can say, I'm trying my best, and this is my best, and this is what I can do. But all of the other things that she said to him, particularly the suicide ideation,
it's rough.
It's a lot to lay on Anthony's shoulders, and I think.
It wasn't an asking for help either.
No.
And
I think that she conveniently forgets that Anthony is still very young when it suits her, and then uses his youth against him again when it suits her. And again, context of what she's going through. But at the same time, like, at some point you have to recognize that you're the grown up and that you don't have the luxury of treating your child this way.
It's almost an edge of her punishing him for not being Edmund.
Yeah, for not dying for not being the one who dies.
I think she actually has been doing that subconsciously and had been for quite some time, if not the whole time between the flashbacks. And I think she probably gave up. There was a point where it stopped, but it could have been years.
So we have that flashback scene, that very intense flashback scene where Ruth Gemmell and Jonathan Bailey do some really excellent work. And then it jumps forward where Anthony, you know, in a moment of real honesty, says to her, your love for my father means that I'll never love anybody. And I don't want anyone to love me because I cannot hurt somebody like that. I can't be the cause of that pain. I think what he doesn't say is I can't feel that pain as well. And we sort of see Violet start to realize how her actions have these long consequences and start to, I think, really internalize the fact that she has real responsibility here, and she can badger him and badger the rest of her children into getting married and talk about the joys and the love and everything. But that
she taught a way bigger lesson early on.
Yeah, exactly. Like she taught them that experience isn't joyous. She's colored the joy by the way that she handled her grief.
And then she didn't talk about him. They don't talk about him. We hear that later in the season. So not only did she teach them that lesson, she taught she kept him to herself their whole childhood.
Yeah.
Not the grief, but, you know, the stories, the joy of it. All they saw was the negative parts of it. And I wrote down, he's both scared and scarred by her behavior.
Yeah.
And you can see she's reckoning with that. It had never occurred probably to her in that moment, which is pretty cool that Anthony actually said something, because clearly he hasn't done that before. But I think it's, you know, he doesn't want to cause anyone that pain, shows what a good person he is underneath all the stuff. But he's lived through that pain. He knows he probably can do it again. It's familiar. Like, it's a bit safer than causing that in someone else. But I mean, as a motivation for not falling in love, that's pretty goddamn romantic. And
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Everyone sort of treats Anthony as if, you know,
he's emotionally crippled, which he is.
He is, in that, you know, he clings too deeply to duty, which he does.
He was thrust into that. He didn't choose it.
And it's all, this episode, I think, does a lot of work putting the scaffolding in underneath as to why Anthony is the way that he is.
Yeah. He's not just the dick from season 1.
Yeah. And because this episode wants to put us on an emotional roller coaster, we go immediately from this scene to Benedict high at the dinner table.
Can we talk about the sweaty Caesar that his hair became? It's very pacey first season of Dawson's Creek, but sweaty and Regency period.
Look, but he is seeing the light quite literally.
The double palm cheek, almost like Home Alone thing is 1,000 times adorable. I would love to see the outtakes of what was tried during that scene, because clearly the actor was having a ball. That's not all that happened there, although it's the most enjoyable part of it. We have what I've written down as the aborted proposal.
Well, I mean, Lady Danbury trying to force something along. And I thought this was very out of character for her. Like, Lady Danbury meddles. She absolutely does. But this is quite cruel. And I think it's also very poorly thought out, which is also not Lady Danbury. Like, she was trying to force something without understanding, without knowing how it was going to end.
Considering the conversation they have under the marquee, Violet and Danbury, and the door listening, do you think they've got a bit of a rush about the victory of the first one, and they're just maybe. Second one's going to happen, it's going to happen now, this is they're so bored.
I mean,
to be that thoughtless is, she usually reads the room better.
Yeah, it was just so heavy-handed, and Lady Danbury doesn't normally walk around with a mallet, you know?
There were some choices that were a bit weird for Danbury this episode, like the way she was coaching them during the match, and why aren't you playing then, lady?
Maybe she's not allowed. Maybe I was gonna say maybe married women aren't allowed to play, but
they had a lot of women
played.
Yeah,
Yeah. The only thing I've written for this scene is public proposals are the worst. And then I've underlined worst twice and added like 4 exclamation points to the end.
Like, they really, like, no. Ugh.
And I think this next scene picks up where the Pall Mall scene left off, where we see Edwina just absolutely full of self-recriminations, like yelling at herself almost for failing and for being wrong and not doing things properly. And just...
She said, I should have been better.
I should have been better. Yeah.
Haven't we all thought that about ourselves at some point?
Yeah.
And if you think about that going through her head, maybe not, I should be, but I need to do better. I need to try harder. I'd like that the whole time. It makes a lot of the masking kind of play a bit more. Yeah. Like, she's almost like there's nothing to express because anything she could express would be just like an anxiety spiral.
Yeah.
So she comes across almost like there's nothing there because she's probably disassociating going into her role.
I thought it was interesting that they clearly don't have a maid with them because they're oiling each other's hair. Well, actually, I said oiling each other's hair. We never see Edwina sort of caring for Kate in this way, do we?
I think we do later.
Do we?
I don't. You know, I have a terrible memory. But I think the other thing is if you go and stay at a country estate, you're given a maid usually, or you take one with you. I could see Danbury offering and them saying no because they already felt that later indebted to her.
Yeah. And potentially, like, British maids wouldn't know how to care for South Asian hair.
Well, Australian hairdressers don't know what to do for curly hair, right now. So, yeah.
I did note that Kate couldn't help a little I told you so, even while she's trying to comfort
I mean, she is an eldest daughter. We can't help it.
And then we get more High Benedict, only this time he's creative High Benedict. And
a spiral
painting.
Finger painting, which was I thought it looked terrible.
Yeah, I thought it was nice. I thought it looked like a love heart, actually.
Mm. And he finds out.
He gets in. And then he feels the need to yell it to the sky.
He's quite emotional about it.
Everybody's emotional in this episode.
I do wonder if there's an underlying anxiety issue here with this man.
I like that Colin is like, shh. And I'm like, you're at Aubrey Hall. Like, there's nobody around for, like, literally miles. It's fine. Let him yell out the window.
I do think there's a storyline about how he's never got to live his own life because he's always been number 2. And, like...
Yeah.
And then in season 1, the potential to become number 1 is very, very high. So he's never got to just... You know, this is probably the one thing he's really wanted.
Just to refer back to Prince Harry, he's feeling spare anxiety there. Also anxiety-inducing is the fact that Colin mentions Lady Crane.
And Eloise is like... It came out of the blue, did it not?
Yeah. I'm not convinced, and neither is Eloise. Eloise is like, dude, you went traveling. Like, she's married, move on.
It just feels like we're, like, wasting time until, like, Penelope's of age. Anyway.
Speaking of Penelope, we're back in London, and Lady Whistledown saves Genevieve Delacroix's modiste shop.
By being a witch.
Well, she calls her old.
It's not even that. She's so mean about Cressida and her dress, which is perfectly fine. She's not being vulgar. Like, you don't play with people's reputations like that, girl.
The new modiste was like Regency color blocking, and I thought they all looked great, frankly.
That pink dress that she starts covering herself up. Like, Penelope publicly shamed a person who was not, like, there's nothing to shame.
Yeah.
That's mean.
Mm.
And they haven't set up Cressida being bad enough to, like, warrant... No one deserves any kind of retaliation. But, yeah, it's not making Pan look like a decent human being, honestly.
Also, there are, like, 10,000 members of the Ton. Like, there's no way that one modiste can manage for all of them.
And Genevieve is not making those dresses. It's all the women in no sunlight out the back, busting their asses getting those dresses done.
So Penelope saves Genevieve, and then the two of them begin to scheme. I love how they're relating on an entrepreneurial level, but also it just underscores the meanness of Penelope through this.
Yeah, I'd say lady boss, but that's gross.
Yeah. I did like this tiny, tiny little scene back at Aubrey Hall where Anthony is trying to charm Newton through a crack in the door, and Newton's like not having any of it, and like Anthony just closes the door on his face.
More Newton, I say. The world is better with dogs, as my dog puts her butt into my face.
It's not enough Newton.
So we then have this scene of Kate coming back from a horse ride. Was Anthony waiting for her?
Look, I don't know. Also, we never talk about the fact that Kate rides astride all the time.
Well, because we're full approval mode.
I mean, obviously, but
yeah. And they're wearing matching blue. It's a little bit off, but it's matching blue.
Yeah. And there's a bee. There's another bee.
Which looks terrible on the first set of frames, honestly. It looked, I don't know, it just looked bad. Anyway, they're actually having a proper conversation about, like, what happened last night, dude.
Yeah.
And he's trying to explain. Then the bee situation, she gets bitten. Anthony has a panic attack. She realizes what's going on. She puts her hand on his chest so she can feel his heart, I guess to match their hearts. And if she puts his hand on her breasticles to feel her heart, to calm him down. I don't know how Kate knew how to do that, but she did. Maybe she just,
It's actually quite a common technique in parenting. Like you can calm somebody down by having them close enough and then controlling your own breathing.
Mm.
Because instinctively you match your breath to the people around you. So by breathing calmly and having him feel her breath, like physiologically he would respond and start calming down as well. But of course, obviously, in this case, he also has his hand on her heartbeat so he can feel that she's alive. She puts her hand on his heartbeat because it's a romance series and it makes a nice duality. And then, of course, their noses touch, which I love. I know some people are like, their noses touch too much, just kiss already, but I actually quite like it.
I kind of like it too. And it goes from sort of like panic attack to earnest moment of connection to uber horniness.
Yeah.
And it plays without words. And boy, do they sell it.
Because they have that breathing together moment. And then they're like, fuck, we can't breathe together. And then they have to run away and breathe apart. Yeah.
Just to get serious before we talk about how hot they are a bit more, I have this need for Kate to have something about her grief and her backstory in season 3. We're probably not going to get it. But wouldn't it be great if Mary taught her that technique to calm down while she was having nightmares and stuff? Anyway, they're so hot together. Like, the actors have such amazing chemistry. It's amazing.
It is. There's a lot that they do with just breathing in this scene that really ties. It is. It's compelling, and it sort of ties one section of the emotional arc up and then opens another one wide open.
There's a constant question of will they, won't they, every time they're on screen together. Like, it is like a cliffhanger all the time. And considering they're only on screen together 36 minutes the whole season, like, it's probably smart. If they were on more, we'd all combust. But I would like more.
They make it work.
All right, and that was the end of the episode.
Do you have a what the Featherington?
Just like why the Featherington, probably more.
What the Featherington, just why
the more I watch these episodes, the more I'm like, this is... I would prefer they spent time setting up Francesca and other characters in the Bridgerton family than the Featheringtons. It just feels a bit unnecessary. They could do it in a better way.
All right. Our what the Featherington for this episode is why the Featherington, and we will move on. Now it's time for
What Would Danbury Do?
This is where we imagine that a character from another book picks up their pen and seeks advice from our saviour of straight talk, Lady Danbury. This episode's letter comes from Neha from Zuleika Snyder's Big Bad Wolf.
Dear Lady Danbury, I know that Joe Peluso is absolutely guilty, but my role as his lawyer is to dig beneath the surface and find out what circumstances led to his actions. But he won't give me anything except bedroom eyes and sexual innuendo. Now we've gone on the run together because I followed my gut instead of my brains, and we're in a battle for our lives. I know he feels something for me, but he won't let himself be happy. He doesn't think he deserves it. How do I make him see that choosing to live and to love can be the bravest thing a man can do?
Well, knowing what I know about books like this, he would have kept whatever secret for a stupid reason. So I'd probably knock some sense into him physically. But I would very much enjoy the heavy breathing and close confines and the sexy innuendo. But I would also be driven up the wall by him. So I would want to run him over probably as well. It would be complicated.
Got complicated feelings about him.
Well, firstly, this isn't professional. You're a lawyer. You can get disbarred for this shit. Is he worth it?
That's a genuine concern through this book in a way that I really appreciated, because it's something that's not genuinely concerning in a lot of books that follow.
Oh, good. I haven't read this book, so like I'm down. I'm always like, you don't even know if he's worth it. Is it running away together in nice locales? Or is she eating like cold fries and sleeping in a tent, or like falling asleep in a staircase in an abandoned building or something? Like, that's not that sexy.
They do have rooms that they go to that have actual hotels. No, well, I mean, she takes advantage of her community to find places to hide away, and then they also have other places to hide away. So it's not quite living in alleyways, but it's definitely not like hanging out at home and getting to know each other. It's definitely running for their lives and like having sex in inconvenient places.
I mean, because I'm a practical gal, what kind of future could you have with this stud muffin? Does he have any money put aside for you to have a good life after this is over, when he's obviously cleared of all wrongdoings? Is he someone you'd like to introduce to your mother? But then he could have pacey energy and it'd be all worth it.
He definitely does not have pacey energy. This is very much, I can't even think of who he would have energy of.
McSteamy?
No, because he's very, I have done bad things. You cannot necessarily guarantee I will not do bad things again in the future. I made my decisions. I'm going to live with them, but I'm not taking
like a
anyone
convincing Jon Snow?
Yeah, actually like a very convincing Jon Snow.
Like Jon Snow with confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Like supreme confidence.
Also, if Jon Snow were a shapeshifter.
Oh, literally a big bad wolf.
Literally a big bad wolf.
Oh, I need to think of another comparison. But yes. Does he smell like a wet dog?
I don't think so. Reasonably sure, no.
I think this is what I struggle with paranormal, is like, a merman would smell fishy. A werewolf would smell like wet dog.
Maybe
a vampire would smell metallic and gross. None of this would be attractive.
I don't disagree with the vampire. I think that a merman might smell quite nice, like the sea, like the ocean.
Like an oyster.
Fresh oysters smell nice.
They do. I meant that as a compliment.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
I think I'm out. What would you like to tell us about the book? Okay, I'm just speculating and doing a...
Look, for all that Neha makes interesting choices, she does sort of make them with reasonable eyes wide open, in that she knows what she's doing. She realizes it's not the right thing to do, but it is the thing that she wants to do because she believes that there's a lot more to the story of his arrest and what he's done, and she feels a kinship to him as also a supernatural, and also like she really wants to bang him like a lot. So once she does that, she feels like she's basically compromised already and might as well be in for a penny and for a pound, and they go on an adventure together. But I did think that the, I don't deserve to love kind of situation, because he's done a bad thing in this case, had some neat parallels to I don't deserve to love from Antony's point of view. Not because Antony's done bad things, but because something bad might happen in the future. And
I mean, you honestly sold me with the heroine actually thinking of professional ramifications. So call me boring, but I like a practical gal.
She uses it throughout, like, I gave up my law career for this, so maybe you can listen to me.
Warranted. Do you know how long you go to law school for? Jeez. And what income she might be giving up for the rest of her life? Like, that's financial independence, man. Better be worth it. Thanks for joining us for episode 3. We'll be back in a fortnight with Bridgerton on Netflix, season 2, episode 4. Plus, our bonus episodes are back again this season. Make sure you subscribe to catch some truly surprising conversations with Bridgerton-adjacent experts. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at BridgertonPod and Instagram as @WWDDPod, or send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD.